retriever?
No one.
What's up, Gator Nation? Welcome into the latest Gators Online show. Zach Albaverdi and Nick Del Torre here, and we've got a special episode for you today, an exclusive interview with the Director of Athletics at the University of Florida, Scott Stricklin. We'll cover a number of topics with him on today's show, and we're going to jump right into it as well. We'll have an ad read here at the front, one at the back, and then we'll bring you our interview with Scott with no interruptions. How does that sound, Nick?
Sounds
Think
good.
the people will like that?
Who knows? I hope so.
Well, I think the people will definitely like our first ad read, and want to give a shout out to My Perfect Franchise, as we do to start every show. And if you're ready to leave the corporate rat race for the American dream, looking for a side hustle while working your current job, wanting to diversify, build wealth, and or leave a legacy, Andy can help. Andy's a franchise consultant as well as a franchise owner, and helps people find franchises that fit their skill sets, financial requirements, time to commit, and more. His services are 100% free, and he's here to help if you have any questions about business ownership. You can learn more and contact Andy anytime at myperfectfranchise.net or calling or texting him at 404-973-9901. And without further ado, we're going to jump into our interview with Scott Stricklin as he talks UF athletics, Florida football, NIL, stadium renovations, a number of topics with Nick and I. We'll see you guys on the other side. Now, Scott, appreciate you joining us, man. How are you doing?
Great, Zach. Nick, good to be with you guys today.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Good. Well, as we record this is the second time I get to see you. Today. So good to see you, and we really appreciate you joining the show.
Absolutely, man.
Well, it's always good, Scott, when you run into anybody for something like that. You get to put a portrait on the wall at Spurrier's. That's a good event, right? For recognized JC.
Yeah, what a cool spot in Spurrier's restaurant. That second floor, visors. They have a little room for fans who've not been up there, where James Bates has done a portrait of all 19 Gator head coaches who have won national championships, or whose teams have won national championships. And it's fun to walk in the room. And, Batesy has his kind of folk art approach, very unique look. And his interpretation of all of, some legends in Gator lore. It's kind of fun to walk in that room and see them all. But there's ever since the restaurant is opened, there has been a frame that's been empty. And that's because Coach Spurrier always wanted any Gator coach who walked in that room and who had not won a national title to see that there was a spot that they could fill in. And we had a chance to fill that one in with J.C. Deacon, because he won his first national title last spring with men's golf. And so we unveiled that portrait and celebrated J.C. a little bit. Coach Spurrier was there, and told Freddie Wiebe, who runs Spurrier's restaurant, that he had to get another blank frame, because that's pretty good motivation for our coaches to see.
That's right. And I think they might be running out of space on the wall.
We got plenty of space. They have plenty of space. In fact, we were looking at that. They can wrap it around. We could put two, on each side. There's plenty. We got a lot of room for more national champions.
That's awesome. And you guys obviously also added Coach Shelton to that wall recently as well too. Yeah,
Coach Shelton would have been added. Well, I think he won his title in 21. I'm trying to remember when the restaurant opened, if he was there when the restaurant had opened or not, but somewhere in that time frame. Sully's up there, Tim Walton's up there, Mouse Holloway obviously is up there. There's current coaches. So there's 4 current Gators coaches. Oh, we're Roland Thornquist, so there's 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a good thing to just do one per coach, otherwise Mouse would fill up the whole room.
Well, there's little placards under that have all of the years, and I imagine that Mouse is keeping some company in business. Every year you have to come like, hey, we need another one. Right. You can just add a new year to this old one.
Yeah. It's fun. You got, Coach Spurrier, of course, and Becky Burley, and you go through the litany of great names, Coach Donovan, Coach Meyer. It's fun to see all the greats recognized.
Well, obviously, like you said, Scott, you're always looking to add to that wall, and we'll open this, talking football. This is obviously critical offseason, entering year 3 for Billy Napier. What are your just thoughts kind of on the state of the program right now and where it's at and kind of where it needs to head?
I'll separate that two ways.
Sure.
From a competitor standpoint, and as you guys know, we have a lot of competitors that make up Gator Nation, and I'm right there with them. It's frustrating because of what the record has been, going back to the year before Billy arrived, and so that part's always frustrating. That's the part that you want to set your jaw and just get after it. Then you step back and you look at, okay, what are the things we can do, and how are we working towards turning that around and getting that program in position where it can compete for championships, which is an expectation of all of our programs here at the University of Florida. And so, I believe in Billy. I believe in his approach, the kind of person he is, his attention to culture and the kind of people he wants to bring in the program. I was reading a leadership book by Admiral McRaven. He was talking about, the team you lead is only going to be as good as the character of the people you bring in to be a part of that team. And so that's a foundational piece to being successful. And, I admire Billy's approach in that and so many other areas. I believe in how he's going about that. And I think there's a lot of, to use that word foundational things in place that the Gators are going to benefit from soon and for a long time. But, having patience and waiting for that has not been any fun.
Well, that's our society right now. Everyone's very patient always. You kind of spoke to it, but what, I guess, stood out to you about Billy? You guys moved very quickly, so you probably had to do a lot of research, talk to as many people as you could very quickly. What was it that stood out to you that made you think Billy Napier is the right guy? And what have you seen these past 2 years watching him work behind the scenes that gives you the confidence that, yeah, what I thought when I made the hire or when I offered him the job, I've seen that's backed up now?
The first time he kind of got my radar, where I really started paying attention, I think he was 2 years into his time at Louisiana. He'd had, first year they were 500, second year he'd won 10 games. And, with his background, having worked at Clemson, having worked at Alabama, and then going to a school that their program at Louisiana was a little bit of disarray when he got there, had coming off a probation deal, and to have the success he had, he was getting attention from a lot of SEC schools and turned down opportunities to interview for some of those jobs, and that was just interesting to me because that's not typical, right? We just see this hiring cycle, coaches leaving somewhere after 2 years and running off somewhere else, right? The fact that, he had a chance to go to the SEC from a Sun Belt school and decided not to do it, I just found it interesting. That's an unusual response. And so I just started kind of following him. I was on the CFP selection committee at the time, so I was getting access to a lot of game tapes, and they were a school that we were, talking about as far as the top 25 rankings. And I just, I liked what I learned about him, right? The kind of person he is, the way he treats people. You look at his background, he worked for Dabo, worked for Coach Saban, had worked out West, had, spent a lot of time in the South. And then as it turned out, ended up going to Louisiana and his last 3 years there won 10 or more games every year and won a conference title. I felt like that was a guy who was really patient, who had a plan, who wasn't looking for the next easy thing. He was looking for the right thing. And then just, everybody I talked to about him just, had such a high opinion of him as a person, as a football guy. So those are the things that first got him on my radar. And so I had it even before we got to that search. I had kind of made myself aware of Billy and kept up with him. and he has done nothing from that standpoint as far as how he handles himself, how he comports himself, kind of people. He is, I know this frustrates fans when we have an opening and he is deliberate about filling that position. But he doesn't grab the first person that comes to mind. He really is incredibly thorough, not only on the ability of the person, but goes back to the character and the fit and all those things. So he has the traits that a lot of successful leaders have. And fact of the matter is, we thought to get Gator football off this roller coaster that it's been on really since, the end of Coach Meyer's time. We probably needed to take a different approach and not just go, not just do something really quick and say, go, you got to go win, right? Because we've had some success in those last 15 years, right? We've had, 10-win seasons. We've played in the conference championship. We've been to New Year's Six bowl games. We've won those bowl games, but we've been on this roller coaster, right? And so the goal is to consistently compete for championships. And I still feel strongly that Billy's a guy that can lead us to that. And it's just, as I referenced earlier, I think there were some things infrastructure wise and culture building wise that had to take place here for us to kind of set up for what's to come. In that being said, as I mentioned earlier, as someone who wants to win, I get frustrated by, a field goal that could have made the difference in a game, or a defensive stop that seemed like we should have gotten that could have made a difference in a game. And suddenly you have 3 or 4 of those over the last couple of years, and the record's not quite what we want it to be, but it's better, and the temperature is a little bit different. And so that tells me we're close. Obviously, we're incredibly young this past year, one of the youngest teams in the country. And, it's unusual in this day and age of college sports, not just college football, college sports, that the teams with young rosters are going to be successful at the level you want to be successful. You look at the teams that are competing for championships, whether it's football, basketball, baseball, you get on the list, gymnastics, volleyball, tennis, golf.
Yeah.
They're older squads, right? We've got players who have taken their lumps and learned, and we are. It's really important that this roster in the sport of football at the University of Florida, that we can continue to mature it and get older, and then figure out when to stay old. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to do in this age of the portal and all the roster movement that we're seeing across the country, right? I think every fan base sees it happening to them and they feel like something's wrong. And then you step back and you look, and everyone is experiencing this on some level.
Yeah.
And so making sure that, understand there's going to be some attrition, but can you keep a core group together that you can build off of? And Michigan just is a great example. They just completed a run like that where they had a core group. I mentioned golf with J.C. Deacon. He had a core group that helped bring that title that he kind of built with. We've got to, and I think we're in the process. I think Billy has that group. We've just got to grow with them, and then we've got to continue to add to them.
And on that note, Scott, obviously when it comes to roster building, so much of it is now also part of the portal and player retention, and also being able to fill needs. And we've seen this staff be able to do it in the last class, and they've addressed it in the 2024 cycle. But also, what they had to do from a recruiting standpoint at the high school level. They had this, top 5 class, didn't have the season that they wanted. And I spoke to Jacob LaFrance, and he said, hey, man, when you have results like that, it's hard to hang on to, top commits like that. But they hung on to the 2 that they had to sign the most. They're 2 5-stars. It's the first time they've signed 2 5-stars since 2015. I was there that day, Scott. I got to see you at the end of the day, and it was tense that moment when they got that call from LJ, and he put on that Florida hat. What are your thoughts on this 24 class, kind of what that does to Florida's personnel to kind of upgrade the team?
Well, I think there's two really important things when it comes to recruiting in the sport of football. One is you do have to get high-level talent and collect as much of that as possible. And then you need to make sure that you have balance across your position groups. And so obviously, DJ Lagway, quarterback, and LJ in the defensive line, those are probably maybe the two most important positions. Maybe left tackle would be added to that, but those are probably the three most important positions from a value standpoint. So to get high-end guys at two of those positions is critical. The two young linebackers, Aaron Childs and Miles Graham, that position with Shamar James coming back, and you add someone like Grayson Howard from the portal, and you got a veteran like Derek Wingo, and I'm probably leaving somebody else off who's really, I know we have some other young guys in there. Yeah. Suddenly, that's a position that the last few years has not been a strength, and you can now say, okay, now there's some depth and talent being developed there. I think our front seven on defense. I was looking at the board the other day. The defensive line's got a little more depth and ability, I think, than it's had across the board. And so that front seven suddenly is looking a little different than what it has in recent years, and that's so important because the one constant that we've struggled with as a football program. You can point to a lot of little things or a lot of things. The one constant has been we've not played great defense, and that's, I don't care what sport. If you're not playing great defense, you're not going to be very good. And so to address some key positions on that side of the ball, I think was huge, and especially the linebacker and D line positions.
Well, and on that note, just to follow up, and I'll let Nick go, Scott, but Billy said at the end of the year in his post-game FSU press conference that he basically said there were going to be changes coming, and said that, hey, this is a production business, and he's made some staff changes this offseason, and not just any staff changes. I feel like he's made some tough calls, right? He's bringing in a new strength coach, bringing in somebody to kind of help with the defense and have every input in Ron Roberts. And then obviously some of the assistant coaching changes. He's got a new nutritionist. From your standpoint, what does that say about just his willingness to adapt? And, you mentioned qualities as a leader. I think one of those is having to make tough calls. And it seems like he made some of those this offseason.
Yeah. There are two kinds of people and leaders. Those that want to avoid the hard decisions, or when things are going well, don't want to take the time to evaluate what may not be going well because overall things are going well. Mm-hmm. And then there's those that are constantly driven to evaluate every single thing, whether it's going well or not. And Billy is almost maniacal as far as the way he evaluates things. And so, when fans get frustrated with an area and they want to comment and express their opinion, they don't ever need to be concerned. Does Billy realize this is a problem? Because he's probably realized it's a problem before it showed up out there on the field. But to your point, those areas that he evaluated and just our regular communication during the season is pretty frequent, right? We see each other. I stop by and talk to him at least once a week, in addition to just the other run-in, other times you run into each other during the week at a practice or something before a game or something. But we sat down midweek during the open date and started having some of those more in-depth conversations. And those are some things that were on his mind back then even. And so this wasn't something like end of the season, okay, now it's time to evaluate. It's a constant evaluation. And I would also say that I don't think he ever stops with that, right? So if there's probably some areas that fans want to know when he's going to address that maybe they haven't seen anything come out yet, I can promise you he's a guy that is constantly looking at ways to improve the operation and improve the staff and support that they provide those players. And that's something that he may have prioritized things based on some other factors, but he's always constantly looking at ways to get things better.
Speaking of another fan hot button topic, name, image, likeness. I remember speaking of Spurriers too, we had you on the podcast probably 2 years ago, right after NIL had become legal, I think, in Florida. And we didn't know what it was going to be. It's kind of ramped up. And to me, I think this system is broken. I think name, image, and likeness means like companies want to use the platform you have or the brand you have built for yourself to use a sponsorship and promote their brand. And it seems like in some cases it's more towards just pay for play or even inducements. And I don't know that this is what NIL would be. I think I've heard you talk before about we need to get to a point, or it would be easier if schools, athletic programs could be able to fund NIL. Because right now I know there's a lot of fans that say the UAA has ruined Florida's NIL. The schools cannot, the universities, the coaches cannot be involved with the collectives. They can point you in the direction. Yeah. But the system we have now, it seems hard to police. Do you think we will get to a point where the schools, the university athletic associations can actively participate by paying players? And what would that system look like?
I don't know how long you guys want this to go. We could spend, a couple hours talking on this one topic. College athletics was really hesitant to allow name, image, and likeness, and there's been a lot of criticism that the leaders of college athletics, the commissioners, and the NCAA office was slow to allow that to happen. But the reason everybody was slow to allow that to happen is what you just pointed out, Nick, because everyone who worked in college athletics knew as soon as there was a viable legal way to direct money to athletes that in some level is going to touch recruiting.
And not to cut you off, but like it does do great things. There's non-revenue sport, 100%. Olympic sport athletes, even football players who probably are getting life-changing opportunities. But we can go back to SMU getting the death penalty in the 80s. I don't know that it was ever not going to touch recruiting, like you said.
Yeah. And, there's a simple reason for that. We're the only level of sport in this country that sole ability to get people to play for our teams is through recruiting. The pro sports have a draft, as does Little League. You've heard me use that line before, right? But it's true. And then, in scholastic sports, junior high and high school, oftentimes it's driven by what neighborhood you live in. But college sports, the only way college sports coaches have to fill their rosters is to recruit, i.e. sell the opportunity, meaning make a sales pitch. Yeah. And when you're in that environment, every single thing you do is centered around how can we better position ourselves to recruit better athletes. So whether, people have criticized coaching salaries. Well, you want the best coaches because you've got to be able to recruit the best players. They've criticized spending on facilities. Well, you got to have the best facilities. They've criticized the size of our support staffs. Well, we want to make sure we have the very best support staff for athletes because all this ties back to recruiting. And now, lo and behold, you have name, image, and likeness. And it's really important that schools have high quality name, image, and likeness opportunities for their athletes. Yeah. You don't see this in pro sports because teams pay salaries to their players. And so you never hear the term name, image, and likeness, but you hear sponsorships or marketing opportunities for pro players. But it rarely has anything to do with where someone's going to end up playing. And a rare example, I don't know that Ohtani went to the Dodgers for any reason other than the salary, but it probably didn't hurt that they were in one of the second largest market in our country and in a market with probably the highest concentration of Asians of any other in this country. And so from his mark, not only is he getting a lot of money, he has great marketability, but you don't really hear about that often in pro sports because these teams can directly compensate the athletes. Well, NCAA rules don't allow schools to do that. There's a lot of lawsuits going on that is attacking that prohibition. And so at the risk of being deposed as someone who is responsible for a major athletic program, I don't want to say a lot about my opinion on whether that should or shouldn't happen. But the fact that that doesn't happen and the fact that there's a lot of interest in having these young people attend our universities and represent us, is why NIL has become kind of this release valve, if you will, relief valve for ways you can find a way to give opportunities for young people. And so you're right. In a perfect world, the most efficient system just from compensating athletes would be for the university, the athletic department, to do it directly. NCAA rules do not allow that.
Yeah.
And so we have to have third-party entities, whether it be businesses, whether it be collectives, come alongside and provide that outside the athletic department. And Florida Victorious is designed and set up to provide that for Gator athletes. I think they've done they've over 200 student athletes. We have 500 student athletes on campus. Nearly half of them have a relationship with Florida Victorious, and the reason they're able to have that relationship is because several thousand Gator fans and alums have supported Florida Victorious. And anybody out there listening wondering if this is something that is helpful to the Gators, it's incredibly helpful for our coaches, for athletes, and for our overall athletic program for Florida Victorious to be as successful as possible.
Scott, you just alluded to this, I think, in your answer just now, but I know that you mentioned it on WRUF in your interview with Steve Russell. I don't think this relates so much to NIL, but I thought it was very interesting what you said. It was just about the need for players to have, a say in the decisions in college athletics, and that they not just be made from the top down.
Right.
Can you expand on that? I want to, again, get you subpoenaed.
Yeah. But Scott, go ahead and get subpoenaed. I've never been to Washington, D.C. Maybe they'll bring me with you.
But why that's important,
Well, I think it would. It is a solution. I'll tell you what. I'll quote a Supreme Court justice, and maybe that'll give me some kind of legal protection there, Nick. But when the Supreme Court made their ruling in the summer of 21 related to it's called the Austin Awards, but it's the academic benefits. Which means there's an NCAA rule said that schools could not reward athletes with cash for academic incentives, and that rule got challenged. The NCAA lost that at a lower court, and it got appealed to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court upheld the lower court ruling 9-0.
Wow!
And as divided as this nation is, it's hard to imagine Supreme Court ruling on anything 9-0, but they did in this case. So that tells you how badly that appeal was lost by the NCAA. But one of the judges wrote a concurring opinion, which, as I understand, was a little unusual in a 9-0 decision. So 8 judges all signed into the regular decision, and Judge Kavanaugh actually said, "No, I have my own opinion. I want to put this out." But I think he said something that's pretty. In his opinion, if you go back and read it, it's not very long, but he basically says, his opinion, the NCAA has arbitrarily set limits on benefits that athletes can receive. And I would agree with that. And the reason that's occurred is in the name of trying to create a level playing field for competitive balance, right? And that limit typically has been a scholarship. That's what schools can provide typically. There's cost of attendance and Austin money now, but basically it's a scholarship. So Judge Kavanaugh was questioning whether these arbitrary limits of a scholarship can withstand antitrust laws that exist in our country.
Wow.
And he said, in his opinion, there are only 3 ways the NCAA could get around these antitrust laws and be in compliance. Number 1 is they could have Congress step up and carve out an exemption for them. Secondly, they could wait for some of these court cases to work their way through and use a judge's ruling to determine what the model is going to be going forward. Yeah. Or number 3, the college athletics could collectively bargain with the athletes what the rules are going to be. And so fans ask me sometimes, why can't we have a salary cap? Why can't we just pay them directly, have a salary cap like pro sports have, like the NFL has? Mm-hmm. Well, the NFL owners and the commissioner's office have collectively bargained that salary cap with the NFL Players Association. So the players on one side, the owners on the other, they agree, okay, we're going to share the money. This is how we're going to share it. We're going to have a salary cap. And so it's legal. It doesn't violate antitrust laws because they have collectively bargained and agreed to it. Well, college athletics, every time we've made a rule about transfer rules, portal windows, scholarship, all this kind of stuff, there's no entity representing the athletes to give them a voice. We have some committees, student athlete advisory committee, where we get their voice, but no legally recognized entity that says, no, we think this is what's fair. And so it is all the schools, the conferences, collectively making these decisions without. We listen to the voice of the athlete, but there's no recognized entity representing the athletes. And so I don't know that we're either going to have the courts. I don't have a lot of confidence that Congress is going to come to our rescue, even though I know we have a lot of congressmen. Congressman Bill Rockus, who's a great Gator, has introduced bills, and he's trying. And there's others in Congress that are trying, but I don't have a lot of faith that we're going to be successful in convincing Congress to codify that college athletics, as we've all known it, is exempt from antitrust laws. And so we're heading down one or two paths. We're either going to let the courts make decisions and rule on this, or we're going to have to figure out a way to come up with a joint agreement with some entity representing the athletes that the courts and everybody else says this is a legitimate way to approach this and balance the fairness factor. We haven't even touched on the fact that at the University of Florida, of our 21 sports, 2 of them make a net positive revenue, and the other 19 are funded by those 2, by football and basketball. And so when you start talking about paying players directly, that money's got to come from somewhere. We don't have an extra few $1 million set aside. We're just waiting for the day we can start paying players, right? That money's been spent on all the other things we want to do to try to, make ourselves to benefit our athletes in legal ways, and also make sure we're creating a great experience for our fans so they'll come and keep supporting the enterprise. So that money would have to come somewhere. And so if college athletics goes to a pay for play model for the sports, for the athletes in the sports that generate revenue, you're also going to be subject to Title IX laws, which means you're going to have a gender equity approach to how you're doing that. And it also jeopardizes support and sponsorship of other sports that don't fall into one of those 2 categories. So that's
something that the NFL doesn't have to worry about.
Yeah, right. Pro sports don't have to worry about it. It is an incredibly complex.
Yeah.
When someone says I don't like NIL, I get it, but it's the complexity. It may be the most. I've heard a lawyer say this. It may be the most complex legal issue in the history of our country when you layer, the fact that these are by and large public institutions subject to federal Title IX law that are run like commercial enterprises from a sports standpoint, especially in the sports that generate a lot of interest.
Student athletes.
Yeah. Just the whole thing is, I always use this line that, Winston Churchill was once made a statement that the democracy was the worst form of government except for all the others. Right. I kind of feel like college athletics, you could kind of use something similar. It is a messed up system, but it's done so much good, right? It's outside the GI Bill, it's educated more Americans than any other enterprise in our country's history, academically. America is the only country whose government does not support its Olympic movement. So think about all the medal counts that we win as a nation at the summer games, at the winter games. And we do that without our government funding any training for those athletes. And why are they able to do that? Because we're also the only country that's combined higher education and athletics. And NCAA Division I schools spend about $5 billion a year on Olympic sports, not on football and basketball, on Olympic sports. And so we have this built-in development program that not only impacts the Olympic movement and not only impacts pro sports because we're a development feeder system for pro sports as well. Yeah. And obviously it's providing this great experience on the college level. It's also impacting youth sports because how many people participate in youth sports with the goal and the dream of getting a scholarship so they can go compete collegiately. So it really touches every range of sport in this country, and it's under attack right now. And because it's, it doesn't really fit in a neat box.
Yeah.
I think we went 10 minutes. We could have gone 2 hours, but that's
a complex issue, man.
Well, more complex issues. I think your job is all complex issues. One thing
nothing's easy.
No. One thing I keep hearing people ask you, and I think it'll be easy for you to clear up. Why did Scott Stricklin want to demolish the swamp and build something else somewhere else? And I tell people when you're undertaking refacing, putting makeup on, refurbishing, revamping a 94-year-old building, I think when you start discussions, hey, what do we do here? You kind of just throw everything out there. And I don't know that you can speak more to this, but I don't know that was ever a real option, or if it was just something like, hey, let's throw every option we can out and talk about it.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Nick. It's just an effort to be comprehensive in studying what the opportunity might be. When we've done 2 separate studies in the last 5 years with design teams on Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, and we have just now actually hired the architect to help design the renovations. But as part of those studies, the leadership of the university, the board of trustees, asked us to look at every possible option. And so we did what, our due diligence there to make sure we turned over every rock, and everything from, just painting up the wing walls to what if you build a new stadium somewhere else? That's just being responsible, right? We are heading down a path where we're going to be on take the existing stadium. I keep using the term restoration, but, restore the existing parts, renovate what needs to be renovated, add where we can add, and make this a venue that's going to continue to serve the University of Florida for another 50 years. As you mentioned, it's 90-something years old now. It's older than any stadium in the NFL. It's among the oldest in college athletics. There's only 2 Major League Baseball stadiums that are older than the Swamp, Fenway Park and Wrigley Field.
Wow.
It is an iconic venue, right? People, when you say the Swamp, you don't say anything else. There's very few sporting facilities in this country for which that is the case. And so I think we got to be really careful. I love what makes it unique and special, which, everybody has their own opinion, but I think one of the things that make it unique and special is how close the fans are to the field. In other words, the sidelines, Zach, I see you down there on the sideline taking pictures. You have a lot of room to navigate and work.
Yeah.
Compared to other college stadiums we go into. I think that's one of the things that makes, Ben Hill Griffin unique is how tight the stands are to the field. And
I wouldn't want it any other way.
How steep it is from there. Right. And I think that creates a lot of the noise. The wing walls are an iconic visual. I think it's important that those are maintained and kept in place. They're kind of like, Nick, baseball, they're kind of like the green monster, right? Is to Fenway, the wing walls are to Ben Hill Griffin. So, but there are a lot of challenges with bringing 90,000 people into the current facility that need to be addressed. There's safety issues. There's comfort issues. So I don't envision the bowl feeling a lot different when it's all said and done. But I think we can accomplish a lot around the bowl, outside the bowl, above the bowl, and do it in a way that maintains and retains what's really special about coming to the Swamp and seeing the Gators play.
And the issues there for fans that don't know, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the Swamp was built before ADA compliance, the American Disabilities Act. So if you touch a section to put chairbacks in, well, you have to make everything in that section ADA compliant now with handrails and certain distances. If you want to put chairbacks in on some alumni section, well, hey, now the family who's had season tickets for 30 years on the 40-yard line, well, their seats might now be in the corner of the end zone. And these are all different things you have to consider when you start doing that. I guess my next question would be, all of that is pricey. And I think you've mentioned a number like 400 million. And the last time we had you on the podcast, I asked, and we were still new with NIL, is there an issue? And I think fans are talking about this, is that you're going to be asking for donations, because I don't think the UAA has $400 million lying around to do renovations. But how do you ask for donations for the project to revamp the swamp, while also still continuing every year asking for, well, we also need you to support our athletes through Florida Victorious? And how do you see that those two things maybe competing with each other, or how do they work together?
Don't forget Gator Boosters.
Gator Boosters. I'm sure the science wants a new building or a new lab somewhere.
Well, the first thing I would say is we're not far enough along to even have a financial model for the stadium renovation. So it's all speculative right now as to what that would be. And that 400 million number, my guess is a starting point to do it right. So you're right. Those are both really important. Making sure the stadium is the football stadium. And I've heard members of our board of trustees, I've heard our President Sass say this: Ben Hill Griffin Stadium is the most important facility on this campus, both from a size standpoint and just the place it sits on this campus. And that's not even talking about how important football is to the University of Florida, which obviously is incredibly important. So we can't just sit here and go, okay, we're not going to touch that because we don't want to spend the money and go through the hard process of making decisions, because we would not be doing a service to this great facility and this great program in this university, right? We've got to figure out what comes next for the swamp. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive, right? We have people currently who buy their tickets in this football stadium, and they give elsewhere on campus, whether it's to engineering or the UF Foundation or another sports team, right? Another venue, another sport they follow. We have 500,000 living alumni that have a degree from the #1 public university in the country, and
Zach,
including Zach. We have strength in numbers, right? And so if we come up with the right plan, I have no doubt that we'll be able to figure out a way to fund that and all of our other initiatives and priorities at the same time. So I don't think it'll be a cannibalization situation, but we've also got to be doing our due diligence and make sure that we're taking care of this place for future generations.
Well, Scott, speaking of stadium renovations, it's also going down at Everbank, and that'll mean that Florida Georgia is going to probably need a temporary new home. A lot of reports about potential locations for that, whether that's neutral site. Is a home and home unlikely? What do you see as the possibilities there for that?
Quickly, as a 13 years covering Florida, would love to go see a game in Athens. And until I get a new job, don't know if that's the case. So I'm just going to throw that's in my suggestion box, or yours, my suggestion.
As someone who's worked in the SEC at 4 different schools, I shouldn't say anything. I don't want to do bulletin board material, but you haven't missed much. I'd put it that way. No, I'm kidding. It's actually they have a nice stadium. I think right now it's still speculative. I know there's been a lot of talk over there. They've not made any final decisions, my understanding, between the Jags and the city of Jacksonville about what exactly they're going to do, when they're going to do it, and what years potentially could be impacted. So it's all speculative right now. There's 2 things that make playing Florida Georgia in Jacksonville really special. One is the tradition, right? Nearly 100 years of history there. The fact that it's a border city, basically right there. Georgia's just across the state line. And then number 2, financially, it is more valuable to the 2 schools to play that game in Jacksonville every year than playing rotating home and home.
Yep.
So if that stadium was not available for a year or two, we would sit down with our friends at the University of Georgia, and we would figure out, what makes sense for the both of us, and keeping in mind how much we value the tradition, and also how much we value the revenue that game generates, and the notoriety it has. Right? I mean, it's a pretty pinnacle part of the college football calendar every year. So, but again, it's still speculative. We've had one-off side conversations. Josh, the AD there, and I've had talks. Our staff have talked what ifs, but until we really know exactly what the city's doing with the Jags, and what how that lines up with future games scheduled between Florida and Georgia, it's really hard to speculate right now.
Sure.
You mentioned the first time I saw him, I was texting walking at a baseball game and bumped into him and just looked up and said Senator and kept walking. But you have a new president in Ben Sass. I see him at baseball a lot. I've seen him selling Gatorades and hot dogs at football games. Seems like he has a lot of passion for sports. He's spoken publicly about sports. What is your relationship like with him, and what kind of interest has he taken into the athletic program you run?
Well, he does understand athletics at a high level. He's it's been great having been on campus. He is passionate. He understands. He comes around. His son Breck, I think, is literally at every sporting event on this campus. So it's a family that is really happy to be at a place like Florida, where it's really important. Ben is, you hear the term so and so is the smartest guy in the room. Ben is literally maybe the smartest guy I've ever met. He is just brilliant. His ability to take in and process information has been it's just impressive to watch. And so why that's helpful to me is some of these complex things that we've talked about, whether it's NIL or other things. I can sit down with him and kind of like give him a 2 or 3 minute intro, and then he's up to speed, right? He's all in. He's offering his perspective. That's been really cool to be a part of. And so anyway, it's good guy, down to earth guy. When you called him Senator, he prefers to be called Ben.
I was just like in my own little world texting at a baseball game and literally ran into him. And I think it was the first time he was at a baseball game. And I'm too sarcastic for my own good, Scott.
No, he's been great, and he's got some pretty big goals and ambitions for this university, and I think it's something that all the Gators are going to really benefit from.
Final questions here with Scott Stricklin. Scott, we asked you about the state of the football program, but what about the state of Florida athletics as a whole? I mean, obviously you hear the frustrations about football from fans, and rightfully so, but obviously the athletic department as a whole has had a lot of success. Just what do you feel about where it's at, under your leadership and where things have been?
Well, you want to win every championship and both conference and national titles. And I think it's interesting. This is a place that, we don't, you look at what we value and how we bonus our coaches. So most schools in the SEC, if you win an SEC tournament, you get a bonus. We don't bonus for SEC tournament championships. We bonus for SEC championships, which typically are the regular season. There are a couple sports like golf and tennis where the postseason is the conference championship. But, for most sports, it's the regular season. We value the regular season. We want to win conference championships. We were able to win 6 SEC championships last year, more than any other school in the SEC. I think we're now at 267. I may be off a little bit, maybe 262. We celebrated a women's cross-country championship. They won back in this fall. They won their first title in 11 years in cross-country. So we in the new Conjuring Dining Hall over the Hebner, we have all the banners with all the champions. Yeah. And we unveiled their new banner with their 2023 SEC championship. We want to win conference championships. We want to win national titles. And, we're one of 2 schools that have won at least 1 national title in each of the last 12 school years. Won 2 last year, men's outdoor track and men's golf, and remarkably had 3 other teams finish runner-up nationally in gymnastics, baseball, and women's outdoor track. And then we had 2 others finish third. So we had 7 of our teams finish of our 21 finished first, second, or third in the nation last year. So, but that's great. We celebrate that year, another top 5 finish in Directors Cup, and then we turn the page and we got to figure out a way to go do it again. And football drops so much of the conversation, not just in Florida, but anywhere in the SEC. And
sure,
but we've got a great collection of coaches and a really special group of athletes, and they're going to. The springtime is usually a really fun time to be a Gator, right? We get to flex our muscles a little bit and all those warm weather sports that we seem to do so well in. So it's a blast, and it's a real honor to get to be around those 500 athletes and those 15 head coaches and support what they do.
No doubt.
This was not originally planned as a question for you, but there's some rumblings with Ross Bjork moving from Texas A&M to Ohio State. There were some rumblings that the Texas A&M Aggies might be looking for a new athletic director. Is there anything you can comment regarding that and your happiness or desire to stay in Gainesville and be the athletic director here?
Yeah, I've got the best. This University of Florida is the best job in the country for college athletics. It's the best location. It's the best school. We've got an awesome fan base. I love being a Gator, and have no interest in working somewhere else at this time.
And then, Scott, you mentioned this is a fun time, obviously, for spring. We got SEC basketball in full swing, for men's and women's. Obviously, the men's team had an undefeated December. Tough start right now to SEC play, but still a lot of schedule left. Just what are your thoughts on this year's team with Coach Golden and kind of what they're trying to accomplish? It's so important in conference play to win your home games. Road games are they're hard. It's hard to win road games. And the team that wins the championship is going to end up winning 3 or 4. They're going to win all their home games. They're going to end up winning 3 or 4 road games typically, and they're going to be conference title champions. So we obviously lost a really tough, heartbreaking home game against Kentucky. Held serve against Arkansas with the big win, big 20-point win in our second home game. I've had 2 tough road games. We got to figure out how to win some games on the road. For one thing, we got to make up losing that home game against Kentucky somewhere with a road win, and then when you go find a few more. And I believe we could be a dangerous team. We have not been as consistent as you would like, but I love how we have as much length and height as about any team in the country, and I like how the flexibility that gives us to play different ways. Obviously, we rebound really well. Bringing in 2 experienced guys out of the portal in Zion and Walter Clayton to go along with Will and Riley and some other guys I think have been huge. We just we've got to figure out a way to play better on the road, and we got to keep holding serve at home.
Scott, what was last spring like? My wife was sweating as I was in Omaha, Nebraska, the Monday of our wedding week. And I tell people part of the reason I love baseball, if Wyatt Langford's bat is tilted a millimeter differently, the ball that's caught in game 1 is probably 20 rows into the stands, and you're dogpiling in game 2. That's just baseball. What was that run like to watch the success that Florida had, winning or sharing an SEC title with Arkansas and making that run and getting all the way to the last game of the season?
Yeah, that's always fun because, once you get to Omaha, it's the only college sport still going on. And so, you're the only one still playing. And when you get down to the final 2, you're in rare company. And, Omaha's always great. That's always a special experience. I wasn't sweating how long we were there like you were, but that's always fun. But I'll tell you, my favorite memory from last baseball season was the Super Regional against South Carolina, and the way our fans came out and on back-to-back nights set records for the state of Florida for on-campus crowds at a college baseball game. And I think, the 2 nights combined, about 17,000 people came out to watch Gator baseball at Condren Ballpark. And my experience being here for the last 7 years is when we've hosted and we've had a weather delay that has caused people to have to leave and come back, we capture about 50% or 60% of the people when they come. We don't retain the same crowd.
Sure.
And both those games against South Carolina, we had the stands were packed, and right before the game we had like a 2 or 3 hour delay. And you walk back in, and right before first pitch when we're actually playing, it's packed. So I thought that, to me, that was a lot of fun, and it's almost like we were taking this really storied program that's won all these championships, and we're creating a new vibe, a new fan experience. And I know from talking to Sully and the guys that was really special for them, the way the fans came out and supported that super regional and really helped propel them to that Omaha run.
Looking forward to this year. I wrote this yesterday, and I'll say it now. I don't want to put too much pressure on him, but Liam Peterson, freshman right-handed pitcher, might be the best freshman I've seen since Brady Singer. So that's a name to put on your radar, Scott, and someone I think will be on the weekends as a young freshman.
Well, it's a long season, I tell myself
the season's canceled and Sully's fired the first time they lose on a random Wednesday in February.
Football, you get 12 opportunities, so everyone is so precious. In basketball, you get 3 times that many, and so you have to try to tell yourself it's not life, or you want to win every game, but if you have a bad day, you can recover from it.
Sure.
Baseball, it's even more so, right? There's a lot, baseball and softball both. There's a lot of games. No one's going undefeated, but yeah, Sully, I think, has got a really nice group. A lot of young guys, got a good mix of returning guys, freshmen, couple transfers, and he builds and crafts a roster about as well as anybody does. So it should be another fun year.
Yeah, it's right around the corner. Like you said, this is a fun time of year. I get to be a spectator once baseball season comes around. So, Scott, we really appreciate you taking out the time to speak with us. Always great visiting with you, and we'll see you around the O-Dome and the ballpark.
Thanks, guys. Man. Appreciate it. Y'all be good. Go Gators.
Thanks, Scott.
Appreciate Scott joining us for the interview, and great stuff from him. If you guys want to go check out some highlights from that, you can go to gatorsonline.com. We've got some stories up from our interview with Scott, and appreciate his time this week. Want to encourage all Florida fans as well to visit rogueshop.com if you have issues sleeping, chronic pain, and or anxiety and stress. Rogue Shop sells CBD, THC, edibles, smokables, and vapes, as well as handcrafted bath salt, soaps, and candles. Rogue Shop is a true small business, and they have 5 employees and make all of their products with their own cannabis grown in their manufacturing facility. Visit rogueshop.com. That's ROGUESHOP.com. And that'll do it for this week's Gators Online show. Make sure you guys like and subscribe, and also get in the door for all of our coverage at Gators Online. You can do it for just $1, and a lot heating up this weekend, of course, with more transfers coming to town, recruiting news popping. Keith and Corey are going to be all over it. We'll see you guys next week for the Gators Online show. For Nick Del Torre, I'm Zach Abolverdi.